Legends of Ninjago, Book 1, Brotherhood, Chapter 8, The Caves of Despair. Everyone woke early the next morning, and the whole monastery was bustling with life and movement as the groundskeepers and servants rushed to and fro, preparing the master and his students for the road ahead. Cole rose with the sun and ate a hastened breakfast before changing into his ninja garb, which had been delivered to his room that morning. He pulled the dark hood over his head, grabbed a mirror from his closet, and inspected himself thoroughly. On any other occasion, he might have been going to a Day of the Departed party, a time to goof off and see friends, but a huge reality set in on him when he looked at himself. Dark eyes peering from black fabric. This was real. This was serious. He was going out into the world on a dangerous mission, and he needed to hide his identity for fear of someone discovering that he had an elemental power. His stomach squirmed anxiously. Just calm down, he told himself. Now is not the time to get cold feet. This is the biggest thing you'll ever do in your entire life. You have to focus. He felt his skin grow warm under the mask, so he pulled it off and held it in his hand as he made his way to the courtyard on the ground floor. When he arrived, he saw Wu, Anne, and Keaton standing next to 8 saddled and bridled squat horses. Although the 8th horse was not saddled, but burdened with a large bundle of supplies. Anne was unusually tall, he realized, with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail by a band of engraved gold. Her calculating eyes were a deep blue, and she was wearing ninja garb like he was, although hers was a deep teal color. Keaton was much shorter than her sister, and much scrawnier, with dark brown hair pulled back into 2 half buns, and pale green eyes. She wore exactly the same as Anne, save for the color, which was gray, with a purple sash at her waist. "I guess I'm the first one here," Cole said stiffly as he approached. He flashed a smile at Anne, but she merely nodded. He felt his heart sink a little, so he turned to Keaton. "Hey, I don't think we were properly introduced. I'm Cole. What's your name?" Keaton seemed a little apprehensive and glanced at her older sister before saying, "My name's Keaton. Nice to meet you." Out of the corner of her eye, Keaton watched as Anne walked to the other side of the horses to fiddle with something. Then a smile grew on her face. "It's not just nice to meet you, it's awesome!" she cried. "We haven't had anyone new around here for forever! What's your element again?" Cole laughed a little and his smile brightened. "My element is earth. What about you? Are you water like Anne Jing?" "You can just call her Anne. And no, I'm air," Keaton explained. "Have you ever ridden a horse before?" "No, never," Cole chuckled. "I can show you," Keaton said gleefully. "See, first thing you gotta do is mount her." "Which one's mine?" he asked. "Doesn't matter, so long as you don't take Thunder over there. He's got a special comfy saddle for Kai. But Sea Spray is really nice and calm, so you might like her," said Keaton. Cole looked at the white mare just a few feet away from him and eyed her suspiciously. He had heard about how horses can kick and bite, so he approached with caution. "Okay, now watch me," Keaton continued. "You put your foot here in the stirrup and grab the saddle like this. Then you push down in the stirrup, lift yourself up, and swing your leg over at the same time, and boom! Nothing to it." Cole watched nervously as Keaton swung onto her brown horse's back and wondered just how old she must have been and how easily she made it look. He placed his foot in the stirrup, but then felt like if he put any weight on it, he might cause the saddle to slip or cause the horse to fall over from being lopsided. "She can take it, don't worry. Sea Spray knows how to stay on her feet, hooves. Just trust her," Keaton encouraged. Cole looked from Keaton to Sea Spray and then back to Keaton. "Are you sure?" She laughed and nodded. He took a deep breath, then grabbed the saddle the way Keaton had shown him and pulled himself up. He just forgot to swing his leg at the same time and ended up with his stomach on the saddle instead, while his leg flailed near the horse's behind. "You almost got it," said Keaton, laughing out. "Just straighten up a bit." It took a few seconds of squirming and pulling himself upright, but finally Cole was sitting in the saddle, both feet placed firmly in the stirrups, hands clutching the reins apprehensively. "Great!" Keaton cried. "What's great?" Cole turned around to see Zane walking towards the group in his black ninja garb. "Cole's riding his first horse," Keaton explained. "Don't get too attached to that saddle, though," said Anne as she approached, Wu by her side. "You'll all be doing some long-distance running and walking today to build up stamina." I don't think I could ever get attached to this saddle, Cole said as he squirmed in the uncomfortable seat. Soon, Jay came bounding into the courtyard, followed by Kai, who had an escort, but was walking without his aid. He did accept a little help when he mounted Thunder, but he quickly shooed everyone away. Cole really wanted to talk to him, to make sure everything was okay after they had such an alarming first meeting, but the timing always felt awkward. Besides, Kai didn't really seem like he was in a talking sort of mood. He never did, actually. After Jay was firmly on the golden horse Butterscotch, and Zane easily mounted Carrots, a very plump brown horse, Wu came to the front of the group to address them all. Outside of these walls, we do not exist. Everywhere we go, we are in enemy territory. Put on your masks now, Wu ordered. They all obeyed, and Cole felt his heavy breathing warm up his face under the fabric. Keep in mind that now is your last chance to turn back. If you choose to follow me out those gates, I am your sensei, and you are my students. You will do as I say, under any and all circumstances, and heed the guidance of my pupil Anne. Understood? All the boys nodded with various degrees of confidence. Then so be it. They were off. The gates were opened, and Wu led the way, followed by the supplies horse, Zane, Kai, Keaton, Jay, Cole, and Anne. Their horse trains slowly began to twist through the dirt paths of the mountains, heading away from Ninjago City. Cole could just see the sun shining brilliantly through the dense overgrowth of the forest, and for a moment he wondered if his father knew that he wasn't at school anymore. Then he turned his attention back to the people in front of him, and he immediately spotted Kai up ahead. This was going to be rough, but he couldn't shrug off this conversation forever. He took a breath, and then urged Seaspray forward until he and Kai were side by side. Hey, I'm real sorry about the other night, how we met and all. Let's start over. I'm Cole. Charmed, I'm sure, Kai replied dryly. He didn't seem very eager to make friends as he scowled at the road ahead. After a few moments, though, he breathed a small sigh and relented. I'm Kai. Nice to meet you, Cole said, grinning under his mask. Where are you from? Harper Vale in the south. You? Brookside, North Coast. So you're rich? Kai asked. Cole stopped short. Why would you say that? He asked. Because only rich people live in Brookside? Or that's what I hear, at least, Kai explained. Well, I guess. Cole really didn't want to talk about his family or his hometown. A subject change was majorly in order. And what about Harper Vale? What about it? Kai asked. What's it like there? Kai looked thoughtful for a moment. It's slightly warmer down there, closer to Styx in the swamps, you know? There are fireflies in the summer, swans and geese in the winter. We don't get many visitors, but sometimes there'll be a boat filled with tourists coming down the river. His face hardened then, and he was silent for a while longer. Cole cleared his throat. So, how much do you know about the elemental stuff? Kai looked up. I don't know. Probably as much as you do, or less. Cole didn't know what kind of an answer he was expecting. Something about this elemental business intrigued him, probably because it felt like he had finally found others like him, and he wanted to fully understand why he was so different. But Jay had never even used his powers before, and Zane only knew that he could use his powers if he was careful not to let them control him. Aside from that, neither of them knew anything about where the powers came from. It probably wasn't that important, and maybe Cole was just excited. But the question never fully went away from him. All right, you three, Anne called from the back of the group. Playtime's over. What I want you to do is get off those horses and try to keep up on foot. 3? What about Kai? Jay asked. He has to rest. Doctor's orders, Anne explained. Now get to work. Their party came to a stop while Jay, Zane, and Cole dismounted. Then they started again, the horses instinctively following Wu up ahead. The animals were moving at a brisk pace, and the boys had to jog most of the time to keep up with them. Jay was the only one of the three who had any real trouble keeping up, as he had never done much excessive exercise in his life, unlike Cole and Zane. The day was long, tiring, and sweaty. They stopped for lunch at noon and let the boys ride their horses for another hour. Then it was back to running and walking. They passed out of the mountains late that evening and set up a camp in a dense forest near the mountain's base. A fire was lit and dinner prepared, rice and shredded dried pork. Wu ate very little, drank some tea, then retired for the night, settling down on a cushioned, unrollable mat just beyond the firelight. "So, does anyone have any idea how long it will be before we get to the Caves of Despair?" Jay asked after he was sure that Wu was asleep. "It should only be another day and a half before we get there," Anne said quietly and calmly. She was staring steadily into the fire as she spoke, and Cole could see her eyes cloud over with a ghost of a memory. "Are we sure that this is the correct first destination?" Zane asked after a while. "Would not the nunchucks of lightning prove more powerful?" "I suppose so, but our spies have informed us that Garmadon's forces are attempting to move in on this location, meaning that he must also know the whereabouts of the scythe," said Anne. "How does he know? I thought he didn't get the map," asked Jay. "We don't know, but that's hardly of any concern at the moment. Right now, we need to focus on getting the scythe before he does," Anne said. "So, is the weapon just hidden in a secret chamber somewhere in the caves?" Cole asked, his heart thrumming with nervous energy. "Yeah, and the legends say that a noble guardian was placed to protect it," Keaton piped up. "What kind of guardian?" Jay asked with wide eyes. But Keaton was cut short. "Doesn't really exist," said Anne, giving her sister an icy stare. "Those legends were made centuries ago. Besides, no man or beast could have survived for that long." "Way to suck the joy out of it," Jay complained. "You'd rather fight this guardian?" Anne challenged. "I don't know. Maybe," said Jay. They fell silent again. Anne sighed. "I'm going to sleep, and I suggest that you do the same. Come on, Keaton," she said as she rose from her mat. Keaton followed her, glancing sorrowfully at the boys before she left. "So," Jay began, "Scythe of Earth. Guess that means you're up first," he motioned to Cole. "Yeah, I guess," Cole said. His heart thrummed again. He looked down at the ground and fiddled with his hands nervously. What was the cave going to be like? What would the weapon be like? How would it feel to hold it? He was excited and terrified to find out. There were a few more attempts at conversation after this, but in the end the boys retired for the night, and in the morning they packed up and continued heading east. They all felt a bit more at ease with one another as they went, but the seriousness of the situation kept everyone firmly grounded. Now heading south, the troop continued for another day and a half before they finally reached the caves at about 2 hours past noon. They drew near from a forest at the north head of the cave entrance, but stopped before it was in view. Wu sent Keaton to scout ahead, and she returned shortly with unfortunate news. "They're already here," she said with wide eyes. "There's a squadron guarding the entrance." Wu dismounted his steed. "Then Garmadon has indeed found the locations of the weapons," he said gravely. "We must hurry and retrieve the Scythe of Quakes. No doubt my brother has already sent platoons to secure the other 3. We must beat them to it if we stand any hope of obtaining all 4 of them." Wu began to lead them forward on foot. "Why not just send Imperial troops to secure the weapon for us?" Cole asked Anne in a whisper. "Our forces are spread too thin defending the border and the Emperor," Anne explained. "Besides, dividing up our army like that would certainly get the Skulkans' attention, and the longer we can keep our intentions a secret, the better." The forest soon ended, and at the tree line there was a sharp drop-off, dipping down into a dusty basin about 60 yards wide. There were several small holes in the walls of the crater, and one large opening to the main cave system sticking out of a large rock formation in the far left corner. There were at least 100 soldiers milling about in the empty space below, all heavily armed. Kai even recognized a few of the swords they brandished. "We can't enter here," said Anne as they all crouched behind a sunken boulder. "There's no way around them." "Maybe there's another entrance somewhere," Zane suggested. "It's possible," said Wu, tugging at his beard, "but there is no telling how long it will be before we can find one, or if there are already soldiers guarding it." He looked up at Cole. "I think I know of a way, but I require your help, Cole." Wu led them back into the forest, far from any prying eyes, and said, "I realize that your powers are still in their infancy, but do you think that you could open up a passage into the caves below?" Cole wasn't sure about that. Back home, the largest rock he had ever moved was the size of his torso. I will try, Sensei, he replied. He took a deep breath and knelt down so that his hand could touch the ground. He wanted to see if there were any tunnels beneath them, and he imagined reaching out with his mind, connecting to the earth. But he couldn't see anything but the back of his own closed eyelids. He was embarrassed that he didn't know how to use his powers better, and felt somewhat ashamed when he rose up and told everyone that he couldn't see anything below. Wu was saddened by this fact. Anne, the old master said, I suppose this part is up to you. Anne stepped forward confidently and created a large orb of floating water in front of her. Then she sent it shooting down into the ground and placed her hand just a few inches away from the tips of the grass. She was using the water in the soil to map out exactly what was below them. There's a decent-sized tunnel over there, she said as she pointed past Sensei Wu, and they all moved toward the spot Anne had indicated to. Now Cole had to use his powers. He was the only one who could get them down there. Just relax, Anne told him as he stepped forward. Don't think about us. Just think about your element. Try to get in touch with it. Cole smiled weakly and closed his eyes. He reached out his hands, palm side facing down, and thought about moving pebbles like he had back home. Only this time, there were a lot more pebbles to move. Some loose dirt began to rise toward him, and he could feel his connection growing. He imagined grabbing the earth with his mind, pulling it toward the surface. Then he clenched his fist and pulled his arms inward. A large chunk of earth, bigger and taller than Cole himself, jutted out of the ground, dripping crumbs of dirt beneath it. He moved his arms forward and pushed the earth away from the opening he had just created. When he let go of it and it plopped onto the ground, he sucked in a breath of air. Good work, Cole, Sensei Wu said proudly. Thank you, Sensei, Cole replied. His hands felt a little shaky, perhaps from the excitement or the energy it took to do that, but he was glad it was over all the same. It felt extremely odd to use his powers in front of people for a change. Now, before we head in, I must tell you, Cole, Wu began. Your mission is to retrieve the weapon, but under no circumstances are you allowed to use it. I have no idea what could happen to you or to everyone around you if you attempted to use the weapon's power. Understood? Cole nodded. Wu wasted no more time and led them down into the hole, landing in a dark, wet tunnel. There were no noises nearby, leaving an eerie feeling riding up Cole's spine. Wu looked into the darkness beyond them and lifted his hand. As he twirled his fingers, a golden light began to glow around them, lighting up the dark tunnel. They moved quickly through the cave system, and every so often, Cole was sure he felt a sharp rumbling somewhere far off. Perhaps it was the Skulkans trying to drill their way to the weapon. Suddenly, a large tremor knocked them back a bit. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, all shook with great intensity, spraying them with loose dirt. The Skulkans are nearby, said Wu. We must hurry before their rash digging brings the caves down on top of us. They were heading down another hall, and there was a slight turn up ahead, which might have led to another larger tunnel. We are very close. The weapon should be just ahead, Wu explained. Cole moved to the front of the group, next to Wu and Jay, to see if the weapon was in the next cave. When suddenly another tremor hit, much larger than the last. Wu fell backward, but Zane caught him just in time. However, that was the least of their worries. As Cole soon began to realize, the cave ceiling was giving way. Huge chunks were beginning to fall now, and in a matter of moments they would all be buried. "Cole, look out!"